So, welcome everybody to A Better Deal for Data, a Project Liberty pop-up hosted by Tech Matters. I'm Harrison Leon, Associate of Partnerships at Project Liberty, and as always, I'm joined by the superstars who complete the partnerships team, Lara Galinsky and Lena Mizrahi. For those unfamiliar with Project Liberty, welcome. Our mission is to transform the internet, ensuring it serves individuals and communities by giving users more voice, choice, and stake in their data. Today's pop-up aligns with that mission as we grapple with best practices that help ensure data is used to benefit people, not harm nor exploit. We're thrilled to have Jim Fruchterman, founder and CEO of Tech Matters, introduce us to the Better Deal for Data, an initiative built around 8 key commitments that seek to reframe data usage within the social sector. This model, co-created with social entrepreneurs and nonprofits, is aimed at ensuring data is used to benefit communities. After learning about these 8 commitments, Jim and his colleagues will facilitate breakout discussions where you will all have the opportunity to augment and enhance the existing set of best practices rendered by Tech Matters by sharing your insights from your professional experiences. By participating today, you'll become a part of the Coalition of the Willing, a broad community of practitioners and activists committed to making data work for the better of humanity. Since this session is a workshop, I'd like to remind everybody that the value you get from today's pop-up is a function of how much you engage. Thus, we invite you all to actively participate by sharing your thoughts, questions, and relevant experiences through the chat or by using the raise hand feature and coming off of mute when asked to. During the presentation, however, we're going to ask that you hold off on some of your comments. You can use the chat function, but please don't use the raise hand feature. We're just going to hold them for the Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the stage over to Jim, who's going to introduce the Better Deal for Data and then take us through our workshop. Jim?
Thank you very much, Harrison. So welcome to the workshop on the Better Deal for Data. And I just want to say, this is a movement in formation. So what you're hearing about is sort of a very early stage sort of concept of trying to fill what we see as a big gap in data governance in the social sector. And we'd like to engage you and align what we're doing, ideally, with as many other of the good initiatives that are going on in our field to shift from the surveillance capitalism model that dominates. So into the presentation. So here we go. So the social sector, way behind when it comes to data, right? We have this crucial data, but we don't really understand many of the issues that we deal with because we basically have a million tiny silos for data instead of 10 companies having all of the data. And so, we have the desire to use our data to do more social good, but we right now lack both sort of technical and social sort of structures to do so. So trust is the currency of the social sector, not money. And one of the things that's happening, and we're running into this, is that people realize that by and large, when their data gets collected, they get screwed, or at least they don't get helped. And so this is a problem for the social sector because we need this data to deliver our programs, improve our programs, justify our impact, raise money from donors, change public policy. So if we're losing trust, then we're losing this critical ingredient that we need to do all the things that help us attain our social mission, whatever it might happen to be. The other thing is that we're an open source developer. We love to release our documents, all Creative Commons, but the nonprofit sector collects data from vulnerable people about the things that make them vulnerable. This is not going to be open data. That's just not an option. So how do we actually use that data to do social good without betraying that trust that people give to the social sector when they talk about being sexually assaulted, about things going on in their family, about observing a child who's working, or whatever the social issue might be. And right now, we don't really have a consensus in the social sector about what to do about this data. As a matter of fact, I have seen nonprofits accidentally disclose, household survey answers to domestic violence questions. Not because they knew it was unethical. It's just, oh, this technology does this cool thing. Like, no, you can't put a dot on someone's house on a public map that says they answered yes to the domestic violence question. But so it's not even that we don't have a consensus. Sometimes we don't even know that we need a consensus or that we should be dealing with this. And I think that's something that those of us who do know about data, those of us who do fund the social sector, policymakers should be raising that sort of standard of how we treat the data of vulnerable people. So we see this need for a better deal for data. Now, we're an open source developer. We're active in child helplines and online child sexual violence and abuse. We also are working in the climate area with farmers and local leaders. And in all these areas, data could be used. Every social sector I'm talking to needs to be using the data. Public health is probably the furthest along, but the rest of the sectors haven't really gotten, I don't think, started, at least at a global basis. So what do we need? We need a way that generates that trust, make sure that we do. We need an approach that's talking about the ethical use of data across organizations. Because if we have a million tiny silos, and to do things like large scale data analysis, AI models, you need more than 5,000 data points to actually make that work. We need something simple, something that makes it really easy for nonprofits to understand what sort of best practices are around handling sensitive data. And we need a consensus about what is okay when it comes to sharing data, what's on and off the list of things that we think the social sector sort of has a loose consensus that these are good things to use data for, these are not good things. And we can talk about some of the examples of how this is happening, mainly by crises and scandals. That's probably not the best way to make these sort of policy items. So part of Katie McKinney-Bach, who are our data scientist, who did a lot of the research on this, we looked at a lot of different models for data governance and data use. And probably the one that comes up the most with our academic friends is data trusts, right? So the idea is that you have a separate organization that actually holds the data. You have a board that is actually in charge with, basically overseeing how that data gets used. It's great. If you can afford it, you should do it. But it doesn't apply to 99.9% of the nonprofits that we know because they can't afford to set up a separate organization for their data. Many of the organizations that we're talking about already have a social license to operate. Nonprofits have their social mission and often oversight from their government. Co-ops, unions, indigenous communities already have governance structures. So they don't need a separate data structure or a structure for governing their data. They're already accountable in some way. And, data trusts, they're pretty much all bespoke. So, lots of legal engagements, lots of effort. If you're going to be holding the national data of everyone who's in the national, medical system, okay, that's probably worth doing, but not for your average nonprofit. Open source software. I mean, this is something that, we, as a matter of policy, when we develop software, we develop it open source. What it has done is it's reduced the friction for when you write software. Your average developer doesn't have to call up a lawyer, doesn't have to talk to anyone. If they want to share their software, they just pick one of a handful of open source approved licenses from the open source initiative, and everybody knows what that means. And that basically makes it very easy to comply with it. And people know, oh, I can mix these things together. I can't mix these things together, whatever it might be. But that has unlocked a tremendous amount of innovation because we've unlocked the creativity of software developers by basically them not having to have a lawyer and having these well socialized, well understood legal agreements that they can just adopt. Creative Commons, obviously, other kind of copyrighted material. They have their iconography of, non-commercial, commercial, CC BY, share alike, CC zero. These are, again, standardized, simple. And again, if you're in the creative area, if you're publishing research papers, if you're, in some cases, you're publishing data sets, oh, great, I just slap a CCO license on it, and it's going to be available for free to everyone, or even CC BY, or whatever it might be. And the other thing that's kind of cool about this is you can also put this in the metadata of your data object. And so you are enabling a lot of use of this, let's say, so a search engine can go through and say, show me all the pictures that I could use in my Creative Commons paper that are available to me. I can just find that because it's all machine readable. Obviously, the closest thing to this is open data. And we have CC0. People are using other Creative Commons licenses. We have the open database licenses. And And one of the things that we really liked about this is not only do they have licenses, but they also have community norms. Like, how should you be doing these sorts of things? And I think that was an inspiration to us because I think a lot of this is around norming behavior, less than like, tying this up with a lot of legal language. Because frankly, many of the nonprofits we work with will never talk to a lawyer, and yet they're collecting this data. How do they actually deal with that? So where is their blank? We don't have a model for sensitive data, for data that should be kept confidential. So, we've been digging around. If you know of one, let us know. But we've been kind of researching this for a couple of years and haven't found something like this. And we do think though that many of us in the nonprofit sector are working with research institutions, researchers, sometimes our peers, sometimes government policymakers who want to understand a given issue. So there should be a way to solve this problem. And that's the gap in the sort of data governance models that we and sort of governance of other sorts of shared intellectual property objects that we're inspired to deal with, to try to solve. So our new model proposal is the better deal for data, a set of model commitments that are understandable by your average nonprofit executive director, right? So it's just like, oh, I get that. And again, as I emphasized at the beginning, we're at the beginning of this, right? We have some draft commitments, but to actually make this a usable thing that a nonprofit could actually say, we agree to these things, we're 10% of the way into that work. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here with Project Liberty to say, hey, you guys have all been thinking about these issues. What are your data use cases? What are the flaws in this concept? What do you wish it could be? And help us design it, because our focus over the next year is, by the end of 25, if not sooner, we want nonprofits to be able to sign up for the better deal for data and know what that means and have it be something that is sort of a norm that people can agree on. So the idea of the model commitments, and we kind of call this beyond checklists, right? I mean, I've been in cybersecurity. There's checklists, I mean, you pick any of these issues, there are checklists, but checklists don't sometimes change behavior. We want these to be enforceable. We want, if people say we're doing the better deal for data, that means something. That means there are things that they're promising to do, and there's things they're promising not to do, and that and if they don't do those things, then at the minimum, they don't get to call it the better deal for data. But ideally, you should be able to actually require them to fix this. And so, and we haven't really dealt with enforceability, but that's our goal of, you need to some way give a mechanism for making these commitments real and have teeth, as opposed to sort of, oh yeah, we want to do this generally. So the commitments, and this is an early draft, and one of the things that we're doing in the next few months is expanding on each of the key issues in the better deal for data. So, and obviously, if you're a lawyer, you'll look at this and go, wow, what does that mean? And so we're trying to actually keep the commitments in the realm of sort of generally understandable to the general public, to nonprofit leaders, to policymakers, to grant makers on what this means, and then leave the legal language to later. And I think Creative Commons is a great example of sort of human readable, understandable sort of things that you're committing to do, and then the legal language. And right now, we're not focusing on the legal language. We're focusing on that norming and the community norms, and then say, well, I'll get to this in a second, but then how do you would actually implement that? So first, and this is very broad. It could be us as a tech provider that's hosting your data. It could be a nonprofit that's collecting data from farmers. It could be a university project that's going out there and collecting data. And in addition to whatever their internal things, they want to have an additional level of commitment to say, yes, we've committed to the better deal for data, so you can trust this data collection and have a simple label on what that means. So the first thing is, we're dealing with your data. And the first thing is we're using this for social benefit, not for private gain or profit. We don't claim ownership in your data. I mean, subject to your control. We'll delete your data, correct it, transfer it somewhere else if you like. Obviously, this has been somewhat inspired by GDPR style legislation. We won't monetize your data by providing it to third parties, right? So that means we're not going to enter your data into the 250,000 organizations that are in Meta's data sharing and surveillance ecosystem. But what 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 is good monetization versus bad monetization? Kind of an exciting question. You can decide if you want to make your data open or if you want to monetize it for your benefit. Um, the original idea for the better deal for data came out of agriculture and farmers feeling very exploited by data collection, by big ag, and big fertilizer and all that sort of stuff. And so, but farmers would love to use their data to justify why they should get an organic premium or a regenerative premium. So, using data for your benefit, you often are going to want to make money with your data or have it contribute to basically justifying how you're going to make more money based on your behaviors. So, but we're not out there selling your data. This next one is kind of what's the basic bar on data protection? We'll protect, steward your data, comply with applicable privacy laws. We will, govern PII and people's ability to request this. Below this, there'll be sort of basic things like you have to encrypt sensitive data, things like that. And if you do research, we'll follow best practices around anonymization of data. And if we end up publishing a public research paper, it'll be available to you for free. I mean, we did some early interviews, Steve and I, in Africa, and African leaders are complaining about their place being studied, their ecosystem, their district, and then they are being asked by Elsevier to pay $80 to look at the paper that was written about their place. We think they should be open access. And then the last thing is we'll create legally enforceable agreements. So this means that the organization committing to do this is promising that these are going to be legally enforceable. That could be in the terms of a detailed terms of service, a privacy notice or policy. And I think there's going to be a lot of nonprofits that simply say, yeah, we're committed to these things. And that is a public promise that we hope will be enforceable, even if it's just at the level of the commitments and the explanatory text of what the commitments mean, which has not been written yet. So that's the better deal for data. And we're here to engage you to talk about, your data use cases. We jokingly call this data Mad Libs. We want to collect this data from these people to do this social good and prevent this bad stuff from happening, right? So we're often kind of looking for that because in the social sector, people are thinking this way, or if they're not, they should be. But we're interested in data use cases because that is our design challenge. Can the better deal for data match up with the great majority of data use cases we have? And then, of course, what opportunities or challenges that you see based on this short presentation? Obviously, we have a website, bd4d.org. We have a white paper. We have a lot of research that Katie did on many of these sort of data governance and data issue subjects. So we're out there. You can look into this, but at this top level, what does this need to do to become something that's successful? So I'm now going to say, who's going to tell us all about the breakouts?